Welcome to Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. I'm Wombadger, and going to be starting a new game here. We're going to start on the populated map. We're going to keep an easy amount of money for reasons you will see. And other than that, we're going to crank up all the other features that we can. So let's go ahead and get started. So here I'm just having a look around the map, trying to find that perfect spot I want to start in. So I turn on the wireframe, try and find a decently flat spot to throw in a construction office. Go ahead and get that built up. Get a couple of bulldozers, excavators, start doing some free terraforming. Next I'm going to place my vehicle production line. So that way I can start producing vehicles, and that's the primary industry I'm going to be starting with. And the reason for that is because it does make a decent amount of money, as well as gives us the ability to produce our own vehicles to expand our republic. And the way I like to play is I like to have a ton of vehicles, which is why having the ability to produce my own is going to make it so much better. And here I'm starting to level out a nice little area for a city to provide all the workers we'll need, because the vehicle production line does require a lot of workers. And given the terrain and how it was, I decided to go with more of an elongated city setup rather than more of a square. So I'm going to set them up kind of in a line, and then I'm going to set up a train platform to start shipping workers up to the factory. And so I'm going through here, just kind of taking a look, trying to put a little bit of diversity in the residential building types, because even though it looks alright having the same building over and over again, I kind of like the varied skyline, I guess is the best way to put it. And so I'm just kind of playing around with the different buildings, seeing what will look decent where, kind of going with the pattern of the taller, larger structures, more centralized, and then on each end fading out into some of the smaller ones. Ah, that is good coffee. Yes, today is not brought to you by, but it is fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. And if you're not familiar with Black Rifle Coffee, then fuck you. No, seriously, Black Rifle Coffee is incredible. It is really good coffee. So here I just threw in some roads and got them all lined up nice and purdy-like. Throwing in a walkway, because walking paths are extremely important. People have to be able to walk to get their necessities met, as long as those necessities are close by, which I plan on putting them close by, as well as walking to a train or bus platform. In this case, it'll be a train platform, because they've got a fair distance to go to get to work, that is. Now, setting up all those walking paths like that, and then hitting auto build and then pressing play, it tends to cause a bit of lag for whatever reason. It didn't this time, but sometimes it'll cause so much lag you're quite certain the game is going to crash. I haven't had it actually crash on me, but sometimes it does lag pretty bad there. Yep, just trying to figure out where the best place to put the shopping center would be right now. Trying to make sure that all the different residencies will be within walking distance to it. And here I've decided, just going to run a little short road out there. It's fairly centralized, then every place should be able to walk to it. And in the end, all of them are able to walk to it. Now, at the time that I'm commenting here and going through the whole editing process of this, I have already recorded and edited and published the next episode, episode 1, this being episode 0. This being episode 0 just because it is a sped up build. Not a whole lot to it other than that, just showing everything that I did in the building process. And I suppose now is a good time to tell you the reason why I started with the easy setting for money is this rail line up to the factory is incredibly expensive. It isn't 10 million rubles expensive, although there was the first recording I did after this one, I tried to upgrade the entire passenger line to electric rails. And I ran into so many issues trying to do that. So many issues I'd never run into before setting up electric lines. I eventually just gave up. And in trying to set up that electric line, I did burn through. I was down to about 2 million rubles after doing that. And it still wasn't working. Which is why I gave up, reloaded back to the end of this recording. And that next playthrough section is what you'll see in episode 1. So here I'm just throwing in, the hospital, fire station, and of course the city hall. Not essential, but definitely useful. And the hospital and fire station, those are more or less necessities. We do have fires enabled, so having fire coverage, especially as soon as possible, is a good thing. I got really lucky, and during this recording, I didn't have any fires, which, I don't know, I just got really lucky because more often than not, I'll have a fire almost right off the bat, like within the first couple of months of the game, and at that point, I hardly ever have an operational fire station, so whatever decides to catch fire, I typically just watch it burn. Yes, the wonderful art of trying to lay some decent looking railroad track. And it's at this point, I'm thinking to myself, when I'm doing this, it's a really good thing I'm not, I don't have my mic recording, because I'm definitely saying some stuff that shouldn't be going on YouTube right now. And you'll see some of my frustrations here as I'm laying this track, and let me tell you, this is nothing like the frustrations I had with that electric track, because I was able to get them all laid just fine. And then it was when it came time to execution, I was having issues with the trains. I was having issues with power being delivered to certain sections. So trains would come up to a platform and then they would try to flip around and go the other direction. Which, of course, at that point, there's another train waiting right behind them. So there's nowhere for them to go if I wanted them to. And I had like 6 trains lined up behind them, and went through a few trains of, sell them, try and solve the problem. Next train comes in, same issue, still not solved. So it was a major hassle. But with this section of the track, this loop here was, I was trying to get lazy and not level the entire area to throw that loop in. Sometimes it works, more often than not, even when it does work, it kind of looks like crap. So I end up scrapping the whole thing. And, what usually happens when you try to cut corners, you end up doing more work than you otherwise would have. So I finally go back and get it all sorted out, do it the right way, and it ends up working just fine. And I do make quite a few mistakes. You'll see a lot of those in episode 1. Those mistakes not being necessarily in the build, but things I forgot. This is definitely one of those games that when you're talking while playing it, you definitely make a lot more mistakes than you otherwise would. Because I was making mistakes that, after about 100 hours or so of playing the game, never made those mistakes before, but it's also one of those things that could have just been complacency because it was things I'd done so many times before. I just kind of forgot to do them. Nothing too serious. I was able to get them all worked out just fine. Yep, back up to the construction area. You got to throw in a gas station for the equipment there. Throw in a nice little road depot. Got a place to park all the crap you're not currently using. Throw in a train depot so I can get some trains rolling. Now I got to set up an export line for the vehicle factory because eventually I'm planning on having a train distribute the vehicles I produce throughout the Republic, where I need them, where I want them, sort of deal, and also to export them. It's much more efficient to export vehicles on a train than it is on trucks because of the carry capacity, and even with this short of a distance, it makes a huge difference running a train. Because eventually, once we do get the vehicle factory running at full production, you'd probably need 20 trucks running just to keep up with production. Whereas we could have one train that could keep up with production no problem. Yep, there I go again, trying to cut corners. And even though I do a lot of flattening in the terraforming, I really do try to preserve as much of the landscape as it is as best I can. And I say that, and I always realize I flatten a lot more than I initially intend to. But I mean, flattening it is definitely, it's vital. I mean, you have to do it because if you don't, you're not going to be able to squeeze stuff in. Stuff isn't going to line up. It's not going to look right in the case of track, and even roads kind of look funky whenever you get them on the wobbly terrain and stuff. So, and I mean, it's not just flattening that I'm doing. Flattening's one thing, or leveling, I should say. Leveling is one thing, just kind of, or smoothing, smoothing stuff out. If you got a lot of little bumps and stuff, that's one thing. But I'm completely leveling entire areas, raising and lowering. And I try to do as little of that as possible just for aesthetic's sake. Because it's not costing me anything to do that, other than it does cost fuel whenever you run your vehicles with the setting enabled, of course. And so yeah, I'm spending fuel, but at the same time, it's not that much. Fuel's not that expensive, and it's a heck of a lot cheaper than paying for it. Which is why whenever I go into any area of the map, I always start with a construction office and throw in at least one dozer and excavator. Usually more. Because you can, I think it's 7 machines are the maximum you can use at any one time. And the more machines you have at your disposal to use, the faster the terraforming is done. And so here I'm throwing in another little loop roundabout thing for the trains. And this is where this line is going to separate the freight trains going to the vehicle factory from the passenger trains. Because I set up that cargo stop on the back side of the factory, and that's where the trains will come to unload the materials to produce the vehicles, as well as load the vehicles to distribute or export. And then I'm going to have a passenger terminal on the front side, which is where the workers are going to get dropped off. And the whole reason I wanted to set up the electric line after I set all this track was because with trains, they can be a major hassle because there's no way to just set waypoints for trains to travel on a particular track without. There is a few exceptions to that. You can kind of game the system, but whenever you do that, it stops the train at that point. So you can set like dummy stations and stuff where you have no purpose for stopping there other than for the train to pass through that station. Or for certain freight trains, you can have them stop at fueling stations. But that really just slows them down more than anything. But the problem is trains like to take paths you don't want them to, which is why I wanted to set up the electric line for the passenger rails. That way I could run only electric trains for the passengers, in which case they would stay on electric track. And then I would just keep the freight track, in particular along the backside of the vehicle factory, I would keep that just standard track for a diesel freight train. Because otherwise, I have that freight train sitting in the factory waiting to load up, and then passenger trains pull up behind it and get stuck there waiting. And then I run out of workers in the vehicle factory, so no more vehicles are being produced, so the train continues to sit there indefinitely until I see the problem and correct it. Which is something that has happened, and in this case I know will happen, because when I was testing out the trains and stuff, they were taking that shortcut. Not really a shortcut, but for them, I guess they saw it as a shortcut. And the passenger trains would drop people off at the vehicle factory, go up to that loop, and then try to return back on the freight line. And even though I didn't have any freight trains running, I already knew there'd be freight trains sitting there waiting. And those passenger trains would get backed up, and then it would back up that loop, and eventually all of the passenger trains running to the vehicle factory would be stuck sitting. And I do come up with a solution to it, and end up keeping all diesel trains, even for the passengers. And that solution is on one of the sections of the track, I put up a wrong way signal, basically, to close off that one track that they would use to return. And other than that, I run all one-way track. So basically just that track, one of those tracks I built through the cargo lanes, it's just closed off. It's not used. It's not ideal, but it's better than, every 5 minutes having to go and fix trains. And I don't know, I might take another look at it, try and figure something out better. So here I'm just laying the power grid out, and you'll notice I put 2 substations within range of the vehicle factory. And there's a reason for that. And that is the vehicle factory has a maximum usage of electricity at over 2 megawatts. And I think a substation alone can only handle 2 megawatts. Those maximum capacity medium voltage power lines have a capacity of 2.2 megawatts or something like that. And so I need more wattage at maximum production than it'll allow. And you can see there, I just decided to hold off on running trains. I was like, I'll save that for the next episode. And I'm glad I did, because it allowed me the frustration of playing around with the electric rail that wasn't going to work for me. And then it'll also, save something for the next episode. So you get to see the trains running in the next episode and that. And so here I just kind of let it build and take a look at it, let everything get running. Nothing's actually being done. So Yeah, as you can see, I also have the day-night cycle enabled. Has its pros and cons, but it does have some essential game mechanics tied into it, which is why I think it's a good thing to have enabled, even though it's kind of a frustration as far as the darkness goes and not being able to see much. It's part of the game. And I'll try to, if I don't have anything in particular to show at night, I'll try and speed through that in future episodes. Just so you're not staring at a black screen. But that's about it for this episode. Episode 0, if you will, of Soviet Republic Workers' Resources, something like that. I'm Wombadger. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Check out the next episode.